you also looked at some different types of gestation housing. As you know, sows are kind of my passion in life. So I'd be curious to know what you found in terms of individual stalls versus retrofitting pens. Certainly with some of the conversations that are happening in the industry right now, I think it's actually a very good time to have this conversation. So would you mind sharing a little bit about what you found?
Absolutely. So this study was part of my master's thesis, and it was a very long-term study. So they actually retrofitted the farm with it completely empty and then brought in gilts, and we followed those all the way through to parity 6. And obviously we had some like replacement gilts come in, but we followed those through for quite a long time. And the retrofitting that they did was, so you had you had 8 stalls, 4 on each side that were facing opposite each other, and the backs of the crates were cut off, and then gates were put to sort of block off those 8 feeding spaces. So each sow had the space that they would normally have in the crate, plus the alleyway space in between them. But that way you can keep the same number of sows as in a crated system in the same space. So one of the biggest differences is a lot of like retrofitted systems or ESF systems, they'll completely replace the feeding lines. They'll have to make bigger pens, and they have to keep fewer sows in them for the floor space. And so the study was kind of looking at what if we didn't, and what if we utilize the space that we have currently and tried to keep sort of the same production level out of the farm. And again, one of the major benefits is you don't have to replace the feeding system, and you can kind of just keep a lot of the structures that are already there. And we found generally no effects between the stall housed and the group housed sows. One of the interesting things was that the pre-weaning mortality was a little bit higher for the group house sows. And again, we'd need to look at behavior to kind of figure out why, but maybe partially because they weren't used to being in crates and the farrowing systems were crated. But that was an interesting sort of side effect. We also had a greater number of sow removals. So if they're in a crate and they start losing body condition, obviously you don't really need to do anything with them. Like you feed them or you treat them, but you don't have to move them. Whereas if they're in a pen and they start getting less competitive, you have to take them out, and sort of put them in an individual stall to help treat them better. And so you need to sort of account for that space in the system, that you need sort of a section of stalls for those fall behind sows, so to speak.
Very good
But in
point.
general, the production was fairly similar, and I thought that was very promising for being able to retrofit some of these feeding systems.
Out of curiosity, when did you put them into their pens? Was that right after weaning, or after they were confirmed pregnant, or after breeding? Can you give us just a little bit more?
Yeah, so it was 35 days, so after they were confirmed pregnant. We wanted to target a time where it would be easier to breed in the stalls, but after implantation, so we didn't risk increasing the sort of rejection rate